How's it going, you guys? So, over the past week, I've watched some old school UFC videos on YouTube, and I made the mistake of reading the comments, which are very cancerous to somebody who actually trains in martial arts. And I found it very interesting because a lot of people are saying that old school UFC is so much more realistic, and the fights are like, the fighters were better back then. They had more balls than modern fights. Okay, so there's a lot of problems with this. Like, these people they don't seem to really fight. Obviously, they've never sparred in their life. It's very obvious because they think that old school UFC is like realistic. Okay, so old school UFC fights usually ended pretty fast. It was usually very sloppy. The fighters in the older UFCs, in the early days, UFC 1, and even in the late 90s, in the early 2000s, they were horrendous. They were very sloppy. Their technique was really off. A lot of them didn't have technique. And it just looked like high school kids that had beef with each other just scrapping it out. It looked like a bunch of gangsters that have never really trained in a gym before, okay? Especially, mainly in like the first couple of UFCs, okay? So, the reason why the UFC doesn't look like that anymore, the main reason why fights don't look the way they did back in those days, the real reason is because over the years, UFC has exposed what works and what does not work, okay? And fighters have been getting better and better and better as the years go by. As the years go by, more and more people have been turned on to the UFC. So more and more people with different genetic makeups have been competing and learning and participating. And when you have more popularity, you have more genetic gene pools to pull from, and the better the genes, the better the fighters. And the more popular a sport becomes, the more it evolves and the better it gets over time. The more people you have, the better talent you're going to have to choose from. And really, we saw what works and what doesn't work, and now we've been tweaking it and evolving martial arts over time to be the most effective possible. So now what we're left with is, hundreds and hundreds upon thousands of full contact fighters who all train in the most effective way possible. So what I'm saying is, the fighters in the original UFC sucked because no one knew what good fighting was. But over the years, good fighting has become like an insane skill level now. Like, it's just, when you put two amazing fighters up against each other, if you expect for somebody to be able to stand up with them and just brawl it out with a fighter that of that skill level, they're going to get knocked out. You cannot brawl it out and just, have this whole like balls to the wall approach if you're trying to fight such a high caliber of fighter. The problem is that people don't know what good fighting looks like, and they don't know what it feels like to fight a good fighter, okay? Precision is what this is about. If you make a mistake against somebody who's been fighting all their life or sparring all their life with the top fighters in the world, if you make a mistake, you're going to get knocked out, okay? You don't have to think in fights, okay? When you see an opening, your body kind of just moves, okay? If you see an opportunity to knock someone out, usually it's just going to happen because you've seen it over and over and over again throughout your entire life of fighting. That is why UFC now, they can go all 3 rounds or all 5 rounds. They can go 15 to 25 minutes without actually knocking somebody out, okay? Usually it's because they really have to see, like, okay, how does this person react to this? They have to trick them. They have to create openings. You have to be very technical when you're fighting a technical fighter, because otherwise you're going to get knocked out. That's the main reason, okay? Main reason. It's not an excuse for fights going on that long. I'm just saying, though, there's a greater sense of nerves, because you know what a high level fighter can do. Take Anderson Silva and Lyoto Machida, which, by the way, they fought. They did fight, right? Anderson Silva knocked him out. If I'm wrong, I'm a complete fuck up. Anyway, that's not a good matchup, and I don't remember if they fought or not. I don't think they did. God damn it. All right, so you take Lyoto Machida, whatever. Okay, most people that believe that old school UFC was better don't even know who these people are. So anyway, you take two really, really good precision fighters, put them up against each other. Okay, it's going to be a matter of precision. Okay. Now, if you look at old school UFC fighters, you see a bunch of brawling. You see like they're throwing hands at each other. Okay. If you run in at somebody just like throwing a bunch of crazy strikes, unless your name is Vitor Belfort, you know, they're going to use footwork and precision to knock you out, okay? Brawling like that doesn't work against somebody who knows proper footwork, okay? That's why most boxers don't just brawl at each other, except for maybe Deontay Wilder, who doesn't really have much technique, but seems to be successful anyway. And I know that's boxing. Oh, that's not a real fight, blah, blah, blah. Shut up. Okay, it's the same concepts. And you see a lot of actual street fight footage of, you know, people trying to brawl versus trained fighters, you know, or supposedly trained fighters. Fighters that look like they have boxing or Muay Thai or something. I've seen, you know, people, street fights videos where, like, you know, some guy gets jumped and they use, like, Taekwondo kicks to neutralize the opponent who's, like, brawling at him. Getting jumped. They're getting jumped by, like, 3 attackers who are brawling at them, like old school UFC. And they get neutralized with spinning kicks from Taekwondo, which is crazy because those are very easy to defend against. They're very high-risk moves. I've seen boxers neutralize brawlers, you know, just because they know good footwork and good movement. If you know how to move your feet, you know, there's no way a brawler is going to get you. If you know how to counter strike, bob and weave, and these types of things. Like, there's a video of this guy on YouTube who, like, he uses nothing but he has random people, supposedly goes up to random people, gives them a bunch of gloves, and says, "All right, I want you to try your best to knock me out." And he just uses head movement to dodge these things, right? And these random people, they're punching just as good as a lot of old school UFC fighters, okay? So I'm just saying, the old school UFC had no technique. Not all of them, but I'm saying, you know, most of them. You can't have no tech. You can't be brawling like that against somebody who knows how to fight, okay? That's why UFC looks different now. So that's the first part of it, okay? The second part of this whole shabam is that, so they didn't have gloves in the original UFC, okay? So if you don't spar without gloves and with gloves, then you don't have any clue on what difference this makes. It makes a big difference, yes. Fighting with no gloves versus fighting with gloves, it makes a big difference. But people who don't fight don't know what kind of difference this makes, okay? If you don't have gloves on, you can't hit the person as hard. What? Shut up. You know, like, bare knuckle hurts more, blah, blah. Shut up, okay? Let me tell you something. With gloves or without gloves, the most effective way to neutralize an opponent is to knock them out. And that has nothing to do with how hard your knuckles are or even how hard you punch, okay? But when you punch someone in the face without gloves, bare knuckle, it hurts your hand, no matter how conditioned you are. But that's why you see, you know, bare knuckle fighters do a lot of knuckle conditioning, like Kyokushin fighters, for example. Muay Thai fighters, well, they punch Thai bags and stuff like that, and they actually wear gloves now in most organizations. But it hurts to punch somebody in the face with, actually, Kyokushin fighters, in bare knuckle karate rules, you can't even punch to the face, in Kyokushin at least. It hurts your knuckles when you punch someone in the face without gloves. It hurts when you punch them in the stomach. Also, when you're fighting, you know, if somebody's actually blocking and not just, you know, taking hits to the face, which like an idiot, if somebody's blocking, man, and you punch somebody in the elbow or you punch somebody in the forearm, it hurts horribly. You're gonna bust your knuckles up real fast, okay? And if they're ducking down like this and you punch someone in the skull, it hurts. You're gonna get your hands all cut up, bust your knuckles open, even no matter how good your punching technique is. Okay? So yeah, I mean, there's people out there that say, yeah, man, like, you know, when you don't wear gloves, it benefits strikers, blah blah blah. Nowadays, now that they're wearing gloves and stuff, it benefits the grapplers and jiu-jitsu. That's total nonsense. With gloves, people can punch for much longer of a time without hurting themselves. They can punch harder without hurting themselves. Wearing gloves is actually much more dangerous than not wearing gloves, because people can knock people out a lot easier, and knockouts cause brain damage, okay? So wearing gloves is more dangerous than not wearing gloves, okay? It is. Wearing gloves is more dangerous than not wearing gloves, and unless maybe you're wearing 16-ounce boxing gloves, but that's even, you know, easier on your own knuckles. So yeah, people don't know what the fuck they're talking about because they don't fight, they don't spar, so they have it all wrong. They're so ignorant but don't realize it. But why do you even talk about, like, yeah, man, it's more realistic? Because you don't even fight. Like, what do you know? So there's that, and then there's yeah, it's more dangerous now that they're wearing gloves. Okay, and back in the early days of the UFC, the referee was not allowed to have as much intervention. Like, he wasn't able to interrupt the fight unless somebody threw in a towel, or they tapped out or got knocked out, okay? There was much less interference from a referee. That's why, like, there was one video of this this African-American guy, or, you know, a darker skinned, you know, fighter, and he was just vicious and brutal. And he was just kicking this white guy in the head and elbowing him to the back of the spine. And by the way, I don't see any difference in a person's personality based on color. I'm not racist. I just have to classify them so you know what video I'm talking about. There's a video from early UFC where a black guy beats up a white guy really, really bad, elbows him in the back of the spine and kicks him in the head. And you know, again, like, lots of fighters did this back in the UFC. White guys did this. It's not a race thing. I'm just saying. It was a brutal video. You know, elbowed him in the back of the neck, and he soccer kicked him in the head. And the white guy wasn't giving up. I think he was knocked out. Like, he didn't know where he was, and he was just like on his hands and knees, like, oh, like doing this kind of thing, and got soccer kicked, got elbowed in the back of the head, and the black dude just kept hitting him and hitting him. And I don't think the white guy was able to tap out or quit. I think that he was completely unconscious. And I haven't really looked up, like, if he died or not, but I would think he would have died that day. But his team threw in the towel. The referee, it was Big John McCarthy in his young days that was reffing that fight. And he didn't stop the fight because that was early UFC. It was no holds barred. So the referee, or so his team threw in the towel. And that fight was brutal. It should have been stopped a long time ago. So they allowed soccer kicks, elbows to the back of the spine. That was so brutal, man. That white guy should have died at that point. That was horrible. And that is more realistic than these days, okay? It is. And that was part of the early days of UFC. Not to mention, I've seen strikes to the groin and stuff like that. So yeah, sure, that was more realistic back then, and it was much more dangerous, okay? But there's some things that need to be said about this, okay? So how much does it matter how, if they allow groin strikes and elbows to the back of the head and stuff like that? Okay. So, in MMA, in modern MMA, where they don't allow strikes to the back of the head and back to the neck, where they don't allow soccer kicks to the head, they don't allow groin strikes, okay? So, listen, whether they allow groin strikes, whether they allow eye pokes, whether they allow strikes to the back of the neck or soccer kicks, won't change much when you have skilled fighters, okay? So, I'm going to have to explain this. So, look, if you can't jab me in the face with a punch, you can't poke me in the eye with your finger. If I'm better with a jab, if I'm better at hitting you with my jab than you're better hitting me, if I'm better with hitting you with my jab than you are at hitting me, I'm better at eye poking you, okay? I can eye poke you too in a no rules fight. If I'm able to move my hands faster, I'm able to poke you faster. But these self-defense, mystical arts, ninjutsu and stuff want to think, oh yeah, I can poke him in the eye. Oh. No, that's not going to matter. Like, okay? And in UFC, you do see a lot of people bending the rules with groin strikes and poking in the eye. And it is very effective. Poking someone in the eye, gouging their eyes, it'll blind them, and it'll really make it hard to fight. Kicking somebody in the groin takes them out for a while too. And you see people do this in MMA, even though it's against the rules, they can get disqualified and lose points for it. But it is very effective. Now let me tell you this. And people kick me in the groin on accident all the time. So, eye pokes. How do you defend against an eye poke? The same way you defend against a jab. If I see somebody reaching for my face, I'm going to block or I'm going to use head movement, okay? So, training against boxing, I'm training against a jab to the eye. Why does it matter if eye pokes are legal or not? I'm training. The training works both ways. It works for the same thing. You're at a disadvantage because you don't know head movement and whatnot. All these people do Aikido and ninjutsu and all this crap. They don't have good footwork. They don't have good movement, and they don't know how to move their hands. And you see lots of videos of these people getting annihilated against boxers and MMA fighters and Muay Thai fighters. It's very rare that you find a ninjutsu or a Wing Chun guy. And by the way, I did Shaolin Kung Fu and Wing Chun for 4 years of my life, but I know that the purists that do that art, they're fucked. They get annihilated. It's just how it is. So if you don't train head movement and you don't train proper punching technique and boxing, you're at a disadvantage in a no rules fight. Okay. So then we got kicks to the groin. Okay. So listen, if you cannot kick me on the inside of my thigh, you're not going to be able to kick me in the dick. What makes you think that you can kick me in the groin if you can't front kick me in the hip, or if you can't kick me in the leg? Blocking a kick to the groin is the same thing as checking a kick to the leg or stopping a kick to the hip or the front of the thigh or the inside of the thigh. Okay? In Muay Thai, they kick to the inside of the thigh. In MMA, they kick to the inside of the thigh. That's the same area where the groin is. And guess what? That's one of the most high-risk moves because it's very easy to check that kick. If you try to kick me in the groin, for me, that looks like you're trying to kick me in the inside of the thigh. So checking that is very, very simple. You just move your knee inward. You move your shin inward. So just blocking that, just checking that kick. and all of a sudden your shin is going to hurt now, or you fucked up your foot now because you tried to kick me in the groin and I blocked that with my shin or my knee. Imagine getting kneed in the shin. It hurts, like, it hurts really bad. That's why when you see MMA people sparring, they usually wear shin guards, okay? Which isn't very realistic because they don't have that in the street, but you get the point though. So you think you're going to just like kick somebody in the groin and that's your self-defense. You're wrong. You don't know how easy it is to block or catch a kick like that, but you don't really want to kick or you don't want to catch a kick to the groin, but blocking a kick to the groin is just as easy as blocking a kick to the leg. But the only difference is you don't spar on a regular basis, so you're not always throwing kicks to the hip or the thigh. You know, you're doing all this time wasting drilling, like, oh, you know, here you go, you just block him and you wrist lock him, throw him over your shoulder, then stomp him in the groin. Oh, you think you're gonna box me, huh? I just front kick you in the groin and then you're dead. Ooh, you're completely delusional. Goddamn, and it sucks because you're going to probably get severely injured sometime if you ever have to defend yourself. And you know, it's really crazy, man. These people, they still believe in this crap even after all these so-called like kung fu and ninja masters. All these people get debunked. And I used to believe in this crap too. Even when I first started, when I was sparring for 2 years, I still thought, oh, ninjutsu is good and blah blah blah. No. Okay. So this whole like, oh, groin strikes and stuff. Look. Sure, maybe it's more realistic if you allow groin strikes. But as far as training is concerned, the way that MMA fighters train is still good enough to train against groin shots, to train against eye pokes. You know? But if you don't spar and train in MMA, then you are too ignorant to know this. And if you really believe that these things are going, you know, make a big difference, you're totally out of your mind. You really need to go to an MMA gym and really try to kick someone in the groin. It's going to be hard. If they actually know what they're doing, obviously. So, yeah, so there's that. You know, and if somebody has you in a choke or an arm bar, and you try to bite them or scratch them or punch them in the groin or gouge out their eyes, you don't realize how fast you pass out when you're being choked, okay? It takes 6 seconds to choke somebody out. You think gouging me in the eye is going to make me let go of the choke? No, it's going to make the choker want to choke you harder and snap your neck. It's dangerous, man. You're just going to piss them off. If you think punching someone in the groin or biting them in the leg is going to stop them from arm barring, you need to stop watching so many Bruce Lee movies, okay? Because they're going to snap your arm, and it's going to suck for you. So yeah, and then, you know, so there's other things. So so we're talking about UFC, but, you know, multiple attackers, weapons, and these types of things. You know, that's a whole nother video for another time, okay? And those do make a difference, but training in some kind of esoteric traditional art, training in ninjutsu and all this stuff, it's not going to help you. It's, you know, that's more about your mindset and your approach. It's about situational awareness. It's about how fast can you run, okay, and your judgment and your attitude, and then your ability to fight under pressure. If you can't spar with somebody full contact, how the fuck do you expect to be able to defend yourself when your life is actually at stake? You've never actually tested your techniques under pressure against an unpredictable, aggressive opponent. That's why sparring is so important. It's not the same thing as a real fight, but it's the closest thing to a real fight. So, yeah. So if you still believe in all that mumbo jumbo, then, you know, that's cool for you. There's no hope. But, yeah, I mean, train in a real martial art that practices sparring on a regular basis. Aim to be able to whoop people's asses, but, you know, in a friendly way, obviously. Be the best as you can. Get as fit as you can. Train for performance. Don't do bodybuilding. Train for performance. You know, get good at martial arts. Get good at fighting. and you'll be able to defend yourself. And if somebody has a knife, run away. If there's multiple attackers, run away or take them out one by one. And don't end up on the ground. I think jiu-jitsu is essential to learn, but it's true, you don't want to stay on the ground for too long. But if you don't train jiu-jitsu in a competitive environment, then you're not going to be as efficient as somebody who does. So, yeah, you can't fight a trained fighter like a lot of those original UFC guys. Another thing is, if you notice, most of the most successful UFC fighters from the early UFC days were competitive martial artists in some way, shape, or form, okay? Or they had some type of real-time sparring in their system. The Gracies, what about that Goodridge guy who did that crucifix with those deadly elbows? Tank Abbott. You know, I think Tank Abbott was a wrestler or something like that. And his style was horrible too. Like he was pretty much a brawler, but he was like a sprawl and brawl type of guy. The Gracies, you know, the reason why they were so dominant is because they were constantly competing. They were constantly grappling with each other. So they were able to own their craft, and they're much more efficient with what they know than other people. And also it's because in the early UFC days, people used to just dash in there and brawl. So all the Gracies had to do was grab them, take them down on the ground, and submit them. And no one knew how to fight on the ground. So, yeah. Sorry, that's life. Leave your questions and comments down below. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you next time.